This is Cape Coast Castle. They say the walls in this castle can still hear the voice of those who were enslaved here. Built in 1653 by the Swedish and later taken over by the British, it was a major hub in the transatlantic slave trade where thousands were held in darkness before being shipped away and never to return. It is one of the most feared slave castles in Africa, a place where dreams ended and freedom was stolen. Generations were changed here forever. Today, I'm here to show you what really happened inside these walls, to walk in the dark dungeons, see the door of no return, and share the truth many never get to see. I'm EKANNARN. Let's dive into today's video.
Windows have been replaced. What we just walked past is the only original door left in the castle, made of pitch pine timber coated with copper. Very solid. I'll give you a chance to inspect the door before we proceed with the tour. They had 3 of such doors. The first is outside, second in the middle, the third here. A little over a minute in here can already feel the heat. Imagine those that were locked up in here with the 3 doors. They were to die of starvation and suffocation. And no food, no air, no light, no water, nothing till they die. Those kept in here were considered rebellious. So as a man, if you were too aggressive, you were locked up in the first chamber of the male slave dungeon. If yours exceeded aggression, you tried to escape. You fought with the officers. You saw yourself a freedom fighter. You gave them a hard time in the castle. You're considered rebellious. First, you're given a good and a resounding beating at the courtyard. Next, you're dragged in here left to die. And the most painful bit is if they brought a number of men in here at a time, until the last man amongst them died, nobody left the room. Those that were strong and resilient to stay alive for days would endure the stench of rotten and decaying corpse. Confirmed that they were dragged outside, displayed at the courtyard for those too stubborn, brought back to see what happened to those they could not contain. This was designed to serve as a deterrent to the living and as well to break them mentally. Initially, a storage room converted to serve this purpose. Rebellions in the castle at the point in time was rampant. They had to institute a punishment scheme to calm them down. Thankfully for us, no one dies in here today, so we'll quickly move outside. But please watch your head. Watch your heads as we step out. All right. Watch your head. Watch your head. Please watch your head. This is the only original door left in the castle. Right. Before these Europeans came, Africans had our own dispute resolution setup. We is our kings, our chiefs, the elders, revered individuals in the society, among other prestigious members to settle our differences. But this is where the court system Ghana practices today. We begin. McLean saw after Captain George McLean. Let's step out to see where the governor lived. Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you took time to count the holes on the walls in the male slave dungeon, from the first to the fifth had a total of 9. So 9 holes on the walls would serve the entire male slave dungeon. Just a living room, you count 9 windows. It tells you how well ventilated one man's space was, with a very beautiful view as well. All right, let's see the bedroom. is not an entrance, neither is this an exit. That is to say, once I give you the chance to see, if you go too deep, you can fall. Those that want to see, you can just stand here. You have a quick look, then you come back. I'll tell you what happened. I'll excuse myself, then we take turns to see. In a fifth chamber, you remember I mentioned that there is a tunnel that connects the male slave dungeon to the door of no return. This is a view of the tunnel. This is where they used during shipment. But when the ships came, these soldiers were not going to lead them to the tunnel because of how dark it was. For security reasons, they were not passing close to 1,000 men through the courtyard. If you did and they decided to misbehave, you cannot contain them. So during shipment, these soldiers were rather stationed at vantage positions. We saw one at the fifth chamber, making it very bright. The second here, third here, just to have the head count to confirm the numbers that moved to the tunnel. So this was not an entrance, neither an exit. It was just there to check on them as they journeyed to the ships. Please be cautious. If you go too deep, over 13 feet deep, so just watch it. You can take turns to see. Yeah.
Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
All right. Just like the entrance as they marked the end of slave trafficking here. Initially, this was a door of no return. It's something very small. The enslaved African have to bend, squeezing through this one at a time. If you've seen Elmina, it is still very small. As we see the relocated door of no return, you realize it is way bigger. I'll explain why it has been enlarged. But this end had to be sealed because the sea sits right behind the castle. And the waves came in, flooding the place, disrupting business. They have to seal this end, relocate the door to a much suitable end. Let's move to see where it took the door to. Here we have a punishment cell for the women. This is a female punishment cell. We've seen the condemned cell for the men. This is where they punished the women. Those locked up in here had this as a source of light and ventilation, and they were fed once a day to the end. At least if the women were fed, it means unlike the men, they were not left to die. Those kept in here were those that would resist the sexual abuse. Taken inside, not submit to them, you are locked up in here between 7 to 10 days, fed once a day. It was to break them to submit. No candidate of rape was ever able to escape the abuse once singled out. Regardless of what they did, these Europeans still had their way with them. This was designed for the women that said no to them. The hole you see down there is where they would urinate and defecate. Right. The women had 2 holding cells. We stand in the first, second is right up to this. 150 to 200 women were held in each. The conditions very similar to the men. They also did everything here. But I always choose to say, in my view, the treatment for the women was worse if compared to the men. You see, you put aside the fact that these women were sexually abused. Women menstruate monthly. If a lady is locked up in here for 4 months, you'd have to repeat a cycle not less than 4 times. Today, in the era of sanitary wear, picture a lady flowing heavily in the course of the day, not getting a chance for a shower at the end of just 1 day. That discomfort you feel. Then revisit someone here locked up for 4 months. The cramps that sometimes accompanies menstruation. Infections will be catching in here amongst other discomforts. That is why, to me, treatment for them was worse. Remember, around the reservoir, I mentioned they had to clean them first. They could not stand the stench emanating from them. The only chance a woman got for a shower was when she was singled out to be abused. If the women were abused, and definitely some were found pregnant in here, those that were fortunate, I use fortunate for reasons, be seen pregnant here, were taken outside the castle into brick houses. There they took good care of until they delivered. They made to breastfeed their babies for some time. Babies were later separated from their mothers. Mothers were returned to the dungeons. Here they would await the next shipment. Babies were kept, taken good care of, educated. The church up on top of the male slave dungeon doubled as a classroom block for the mulattoes. The children born out of the abuse were educated. They would grow to be the aristocrats we had in the sight, the big men, the big women. Some became slave merchants because of what they saw growing up. If unfortunately you were not seen pregnant here but en route to the New World, you were killed. Most were thrown overboard. Nobody was going to take care of a pregnant woman during that voyage. Nobody was going to purchase one. But the question is compensations. When slave trafficking got abolished, a group was compensated between the enslaver, the European, and the enslaved, the African. Who deserves compensations and who was compensated? You see, the enslaver was given compensations because they were seen to have lost businesses. They are taking food from their tables. They were compensated. Up until now, we still hear calls for reparations. Compensations are still demanded for the harm committed against humanity. Reading How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. There's still this conception that Africa still suffers the impact of slave trafficking. Because a chunk of the human population was uprooted, and for any nation to develop human resource comes in handy. A little over 3 years ago, the former president of Ghana, Nana Addo, he joined the call for reparations, admonished African leaders to come together, demand for compensations from the West. 6 weeks ago, Ghana discussed reparations in our parliament. But then when the former president mentioned this, I had a conversation with my boss that to me, reparations are better deserved by Africans in the diaspora because they are the direct descendants of the enslaved Africans. He would argue otherwise. He believes Africans here, to a larger extent, deserve some compensations because Africa could have been better off had it not been impact of slave trafficking. And they needed the able-bodied men. What happened to the families they broke? The old men, the old women, the children, and all that. I was like, points well made. Split them into two. First, you go to those in the diaspora. Like it or not, they are the direct descendants. And whatever is to be allocated Africans here, in my view, should be a direct investment in infrastructure among other developmental projects. Let us help each other go. Thankfully, we are not enslaved. We'll walk through the door of no return, definitely to return. Let's see what lies beyond the door. Cool, man. Yeah, fine, yeah. Back in the day, right here, we'll be met with boats and canoes to be conveyed to the ship. And the sea was up to this level. Because of sand-winning activities in this area, that is why we see the sea back today. The sea gradually was moving into the township, destroying buildings. And the stones you see here, the sea defense, the sea wall, is what is holding the sea back today. There's an initiative by the government to hold the sea back. Want a rocky and a shallow coast suitable for swimming. The name of this shore is Abrofumpuanu. It translates to White Man's Beach. It still answers to this name today. You find yourself anywhere in Cape Coast today, you get yourself a cup. Abrofumpuanu, this is where you're going to be brought to, suitable for swimming. The nature would not permit the big ships to come ashore. They would have to dock far from shore. They came with boats and canoes for the enslaved Africans. The Africans have a very powerful belief in reincarnation. They have a belief that once you die, you have a chance for rebirth. You come to life in another way. And with this belief in mind, history says some of these enslaved Africans saw prestige in death. Some chose death over captivity, with the belief that dying here on their lands, they had a chance for rebirth. Sailing to the ships, they decided to jump overboard. He says, yes, some chose it, others were just unfortunate, tied together with those that wanted to. Once those ones decided to jump overboard, you have to drag along those tied together with them straight to the sea. But then those that would survive to the ships will be parked on shelves, head tail. Then the voyage to the world unknown will begin. If we turn briefly, we see something else up on top of the door. Yeah. All right. So up here you see something else at the door of return. Let's move closer. All right. We'd have this here in 1998 when Ghana first celebrated Emancipation Day. 1998. During our maiden Panafest celebration, Emancipation Day celebration, the African diaspora will be invited. Every black person out there, former President Jerry John Rawlings will invite the African diaspora. Those that would honor that invitation coming will not come empty-handed. From the ancestral graveyards in Jamaica, those that came would return with the remains of a woman called Madame Crystal. Passing them through the door was to break what we saw, that jinx, before we stepped out. As an enslaved African, there was no return for you. This was a very important message to every black person out there. You have a belief that wherever you find yourself on earth, the fact that you're a black person, you are from Africa. Passing them through this door was an invitation to our brothers and sisters in the diaspora to reconnect with their roots and their ancestry. They held a special funeral celebration in here for them, dubbed the Great Homecoming. Thereafter, they were taken to Asin Mantu. There they were reinterred. Most of us should have seen this word. I will know what it means. Sure. I'm very sure. All right, it means welcome. Do we know this, especially the Ghanaians? We have like 3 Ghanaians here. Do we know this comes from 2 Akan words? I'll be so happy if I get the answer from a non-Ghanaian. We know this comes from 2 Akan words. Oh, you can't tell me. Akwaba, yes. So in Akan, Ako is to leave, Aba is to return. Akwaba, you left, you return. It is not just welcome, it speaks to a deeper sense of belongingness. Experiencing Cape Coast Slave Castle, to some this is an excursion, family vacation, stress relief, research purposes. We come with diverse reasons, but to some, visiting this edifice is a spiritual pilgrimage that reconnects them to their roots and their ancestry. Regardless of your reasons, when we walk you through the door of no return, back through the door of return, we give you an akwaba to the castle. We respond by saying medase. Medase means thank you. Akwaba, medase. This was unveiled July 11th, 2009. President Barack Obama and his family. He happens to be the only visiting president that would come to Cape Coast. Every other does his business in Accra and they leave. The Obamas would see this edifice because Michelle, his wife, believes she traced her ancestry from here. Their experience would begin from the door of return upwards. May those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. And may humanity never again perpetuate such injustice against humanity. And that we, the living, vow to uphold this. Usually I add something small to that piece of message before we draw the curtains to the experience. I would say, irrespective of our color, the tribe, gender, race, religion, spirituality, whatever our differences would be, you find yourselves in any space there are any forms of injustice mishappening in and around the space, do not shy away from speaking up. Do not keep quiet. Speak out. I always ask 2 questions. I'm yet to get an answer. Maybe I'll get it from this group today. The European was alien to Africa. They were strangers on our land. How on earth would they have successfully navigated these lands without the help of some Africans? You see, Ashanti region, Burkina Faso and beyond, is a landlocked space. There is no sea. The whole Burkina Faso as a country has no sea. Yet, more of these enslaved Africans, the men were captured more as far back as Burkina. Some of the biggest slave markets here in Ghana are situated up north, landlocked space. Yet the European came from the sea. How would this be possible without the role of some Africans? It is to remind us that raidings and kidnappings were not only done by Europeans. Some Africans played a role in a way or two. I always say experiencing Cape Coast Slave Castle was never necessarily meant as preaching hatred, enmity or divisions between the groups or race. It isn't to point accusing fingers at who did what or what who did, but to send a very important message to humanity, and that is never again. And never again is not limited to slavery, it is to all forms of injustice and mishappenings in and around our space today. Martin Luther once said that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Remember what affects people directly, indirectly finds a way to affect us all. Today it is my turn. Tomorrow it can be yours. Help me fight and extinguish mine does not even extend to you in the first place. Experiencing the dungeons, you realize they are very empty, all without doors. But ask yourself if truly slavery is over. Injustice in our communities, racism, child trafficking, child prostitution, tribalism, a whole host of them. I say I am not the best person to give you the most accurate account of the happenings here in the castle. If these walls had mouth and they could speak, the best, most accurate, maybe worse, they would scream to you, not representation today. What I will leave you with today is never again. Moving beyond these walls, irrespective of the difference. You find yourselves in any space, there are any forms of injustice happening. Do not keep quiet, speak out. Perhaps your words could be that final straw that can cause, trigger, and effect the change you hope for. In our own little ways, let us all help and contribute to making the world a better place. Once again, my name is Nana Koapia, and it's been a pleasure leading around for this tour. Thank you very much for seeing Cape Coast Slave Castle.
While filming this, I almost lost my phone. Please subscribe to help me reach my goal of 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year. Thank you very much for your support.